We know some people want our ideas to seem impossible. Ideas like a fairer tax system or reining in the gas industry or transparency in politics. And yet time and time again, the Australia Institute has succeeded in making politically impossible ideas seem inevitable. But we can't do it alone. If you love dollars and cents, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution in our end of financial year appeal. Even better, thanks to 4 generous donors, every dollar donated until June 30 will be matched, dollar for dollar, until we reach our goal. So you'll double your impact if you make a donation at australiainstitute.org.au today. I hope you enjoyed today's show.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australian Institute podcast where we talk about what the hell is going on in the Australian economy. I'm Eleanor Johnston-Leake, the senior content producer here at the Australian Institute, and I am joined by our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Eleanor. We're doing things backwards.
We are. So, Greg, why the hell is everyone suddenly talking about nuclear?
Nuclear energy is toxic. It's risky.
It's about doing the right thing by the country.
We have to have nuclear energy in the mix.
That announcement this week had the hallmarks of thought, research, and most of all, political courage.
A mob who'd struggle to assemble an IKEA flat pack.
The only credible pathway to decarbonise and reach net zero.
Or we can have Peter Dutton's nuclear fantasy.
Instead of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, this is Peter Dutton and the 7 nuclear reactors.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Eleanor, and it's something that I've been, and I think all of us here at the Australian Institute have been a little bit frustrated about because it kind of misses the main game that's really going on, because it's what we call a faux debate, really, because I don't think actually anyone thinks nuclear power is likely to ever come in, and we're talking about things that might happen in, say, 2050, which, yeah, let's govern for the future, but governing is also about things happening right now. And the problem with the nuclear debate is it really takes the focus off of what's happening right now.
So the coalition recently came out with their nuclear plan for building 7 nuclear power plants. So do you think that's all a bit of a sham?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bowen has called it a scam, I think, and actually I think he's not too far wrong, really. It's a policy. We don't have any dollars. Apparently the Liberal Party does know how much it costs. They just want to keep it secret.
They won't tell us.
They don't know how much power is actually going to be produced. They're not even sure how many reactors will be on each power plant. And apparently they're not even going to be the ones deciding it. Some nuclear board that hasn't been appointed, doesn't exist at the moment, they're going to be the ones who will decide. None of the states want it. Most of the companies that own these coal-fired power stations sites that apparently the nuclear power sites are going to be on, they don't want it. And to be honest, no one in the public wants it as soon as you turn the question from, are you okay with us sort of thinking about nuclear power to, would you like a nuclear power station anywhere near where you live or even in the state where you live or even actually anywhere? And they very quickly are like, that's pretty crap. So I think it's all a bit of a nothing burger to use the sort of American expression, but it's very good at distracting.
What do you think they're distracting from?
Well, the Liberals are distracting from the fact that they've actually got no policy on climate change, that they're a party riven with climate change deniers, and this is a policy that looks like they're trying to think about sort of doing something they can sort of throw around, zero emissions and, clean energy, and it all ignores the reality that they have no idea how to actually reduce emissions, and actually I don't think any desire to reduce emissions. They're quite happy with coal and gas, and they all ignore the fact that this thing, even if everything goes perfectly according to plan, we're looking at 2050, by which time, climate change will have smashed us.
Yeah. And speaking of emissions, are we on track at all?
No. Not
Not
even
really.
Close. Nowhere near it. Nowhere near being on track, even for the government sort of pretty lame targets of 43% emissions reductions from 2005 levels by 2030. And God, there's just a lot of numbers I just said there. So let's just say 43% by 2030. They're nowhere near that. And the other kind of real scary thing is that the last sort of 4 years, emissions have barely gone down at all. In fact, they're kind of flat. And so if you look over the past 7 or 8 years, all of the big reductions in emissions came during the COVID years when we're all locked down. And since then, it's not like we've taken the baton and run with that. We've just kind of gone back to normality or pre-COVID normality, and emissions are not coming down at all.
Oh. So if we want to bring down emissions to our 2030 targets, maybe looking long-term to build nuclear reactors by 2050 is not quite the answer.
Yeah, I mean, when it is tricky. You got to think through the maths, but yes, 2050 comes after 2030.
Look, I'm not an economist, but I think I might agree with you there.
Yeah, it's complex, I realise, so we'll take it slow. But yes, 2050 comes after 2030, so if you want to get something done by 2030, you have to do that before 2030. And this is one of the other things that, and this is what I wrote about in my Guardian piece this week, is that the government, when it talks about lowering emissions, really is still using some pretty dodgy accounting. It's counting a thing that we call land use, and it's all to do with land clearing, essentially. And the great thing about our Paris targets is 2005 is the base year. That's where you measure everything from. And 2005 happened to be a year in which, especially in Queensland, there was a hell of a lot of land clearing going on. So by virtue of the fact we're not doing as much land clearing as we did in that really astronomical year of 2005, where we're cutting down trees and doing everything bad for the environment, or at least certainly for land clearing, the fact that we're not doing that now makes it look like, oh, we've reduced emissions, but we haven't really reduced emissions. If you include land clearing, since 2005, we've reduced emissions by 29%, which sounds like, oh, wow, we're really on our way to 43%. If you take out land clearing, if you take out that sort of abnormality of the figures, overall, all emissions have only gone down 2.5%.
2.5%.
2.5%.
Rather than 29.
Yeah.
It's
so there's
quite
a reason why the
difference.
government likes saying 29% rather than 2.5%. And, there's a lot of history behind this, and we've talked about this, I know, on other podcasts here at the Australian Institute. Basically, it's a relic of some pretty dodgy work by the Howard government, who would not sign up to the Kyoto Agreement unless they could include land clearing. Back then, they wanted 1990 as the base year, and coincidentally, that was another year where we did a hell of a lot of land clearing.
Wow.
So it's so bad that it's actually known as the Australian rule, that we've included land clearing, because Australia's the only country that really benefits from this. It makes our figures look better. It's dodgy as hell, and really, if the government wanted to be truly honest about dealing with climate change, the first thing it could do is say, yeah, we're not going to use the same accounting that John Howard, Tony Abbott, every climate change denier of the past 30 years from the Liberal Party thought was great. We're actually going to be honest.
How likely is that?
Yeah, it's not likely at all. But also, one of the things that and this is another interesting thing about this whole nuclear debate, which is about electricity, which, fine, electricity is a major part of our emissions. It makes up about a third of all our actual emissions. But actually, our reductions in electricity have been quite good.
Okay.
It's the other areas. It's transport, it's waste, it's what we call stationary energy, emissions from industrial processes. They've been rising and, in effect, kind of cancelling out a lot of the reductions in electricity. So if you focus just on electricity, that's great. But what about our cars? What about, our waste? What about what's happening in agriculture? What's happening with industrial uses? All of those things we are selectively ignoring when we're just focusing on nuclear power and, we need reductions in how our electricity is generated. That's important, but it's not the whole game. And I think the Labor Party, I think the Liberal Party are all very happy to be arguing about nuclear. The Liberal Party like it because it's in a sense throwing meat to the climate change deniers who bizarrely happen to like nuclear power. It's great for businesses. Businesses love it because coal and gas companies feel very happy because they know if we're going for nuclear power, we're going to need a lot of coal and gas for a very long time.
Yep.
And the Labor Party likes it because they look good by comparison, because they're not going for nukes, so they can please the voters who think that we need more renewables purely by saying, yeah, we like renewables rather than nuclear. And it's all wonderful, but while they're having this sham of a debate, the other things are happening.
Yeah. And speaking of other things happening, have we stopped opening fossil fuel projects at all? You know, that sort of big elephant in the room?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This is kind of what spurred my whole writing the column this week. And listeners might be going, this is a bit off track. Normally it's all about, they might have been thinking it's going to be interest rates and inflation. But it's like, actually, this I think is a bit more important. Last Friday, the Department of Environment, and last Friday we were really all in this nuclear debate, the Department of Environment approved a gas pipeline for a coal seam gas project, part owned by Gina Reinhardt.
Wow.
People might have heard of her, known Greenie.
Seen a picture of her recently.
And they approved this gas pipeline in southeast Queensland out to 2069. So forget 2030, forget 2050, 2069. And then this week as well, the Department of Environment, again, this is led by Tanya Plibersek, who has pledged that, you know, she's going to do all she can to keep emissions down. She'll make the hard choices and there will be no extinctions under her watch.
Yep.
They approved what's known as the Atlas 3 gas project. Again, it's around the same area. In effect, the pipeline hooks up with the gas project and everything. This is for a vast number of coal seam gas wells. And she's approved this out to 2080.
2080?
2080.
Oh
so in a
gosh.
sense, right now the government is saying our emissions reduction policy is that we will need gas till 2080, and we need more gas than we have now, in a sense. And the clue is in the name, but gas actually contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. It's gas, greenhouse gas. Yeah. They are. There is a link. This is the problem with the talk about nuclear. All sounds wonderful. Labor looks great. Government feels really happy, and then they just keep on improving gas mines.
Don't look over here while we keep opening gas till 2080.
First it was electricity, now we're being warned of a gas crisis.
Outages at coal-fired power stations has increased demand for gas, particularly in Victoria, and there are concerns over supply.
He warns that energy prices next year will climb.
The cost of living crisis is set to deepen for Australian households.
The problem is that our governments have given away control of our gas resources to a group of multinational oil and gas companies who are now making us compete with exports for our own gas.
What we're seeing with our gas is state-sanctioned daylight robbery.
So the government continuing to open new gas projects, that's often justified with the argument that it's needed to fix domestic gas shortages. And that's an argument that the gas industry really seems keen to support. Is there any merit in that?
Yeah, we hear it all the time. We're running out of gas. Ted O'Brien, the opposition spokesperson, in a sense, for nuclear power, even said that Australia is running out of energy, which is just an extraordinary statement itself. And we even had this week a bit of a report that, there might be gas shortages in Victoria. And so there's this sense of we need more gas. We need more gas. Australia has absolute oodles of gas, masses of gas, stonks of gas. We have so much gas that 72% of all the gas we get out of Australia, we send overseas. We export overseas.
72%.
72%. And a further sort of around 8% of all the gas we use is used to convert that gas to LNG so we could send it overseas. So in a sense, around 80% of all the gas that Australia produces right now is either exported or used to turn into LNG so it can be exported.
So I'm thinking if there is a domestic gas shortage, there might be a different solution than open more gas fields.
Yeah, it's not a case we're running out of gas. It's the case that gas companies want to export gas overseas. Gas companies really don't care about domestic gas. There's no money in domestic gas. There's no money in Australia. Why would you want that? And we've been sold this line that we need more gas because we're running out of gas, and it's not true. It's even been sort of argued that, we need to export this gas because that's a good foreign policy because Japan needs this gas, and Japan is one of the big exporters.
Why does Japan need this gas?
Well, they don't actually need all this gas because what we also know is that gas from Australia, a lot of it is exported to Japan, but actually they then on-sell more of the gas that they get from us to other nations. So they actually, they get a lot of gas from us. They not only then sell that to other nations, they sell more than we actually even exported. They get gas from other places and sell it.
Yeah.
It's not like we are giving gas to Japan so Japanese can keep their lights on. No, they're doing fine. In fact, their domestic demand for gas is falling. What they're doing is making nice profits out of then selling it to other areas in Asia, in the Pacific Islands, Philippines and places like that. And so this argument that, and we've heard it from the government that, if we don't sell gas to Japan, they might be forced to fall into the arms of Russia because Russia's got gas and that'll destabilize the area. And it's like, no, what it will destabilise is the profits of Japanese companies who are drilling for gas here in Australia and then selling that gas to Japan and making lots of profits, not paying any royalties here, not paying any petroleum resources rent tax. So it's a case of, is it really our gas or is it Japanese companies' gas who we're not even charging for? They're getting it for free. We're not even really taxing them properly.
So what do you mean that they get it for free? That sounds ridiculous.
That's because it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but it is how we operate. You think about iron ore and coal, and people might have heard of things called royalties. Let's say you're a Twiggy Forest and you're digging up some iron ore. You actually have to pay the Western Australian or Queensland government or wherever you're getting it from. You pay a royalty for, in a sense, the fact that you would taking that iron ore and it's irreplaceable. It's gone once you use it. So in effect, you're paying for it because the government owns it. Australian citizens own those resources. But with gas, if it's offshore, as we see with a lot of projects over in Western Australia, they don't pay royalties on that. There was a decision made that offshore gas, no royalties. And the other problem is, if it's on land, so you might think, all those coal seam gas in Queensland, yes, they do pay royalties, but they're not subject to petroleum resources rent taxes.
Why not?
Because a decision was made by Scott Morrison to exclude them from being subject to PRT. So you might think, okay, so one doesn't pay royalties, one does. One has to pay PRT, one doesn't. Problem is, the PRT is so easy to avoid, as I've pointed out in the past, that actually organisations like INPEX for their major gas project in the Timor Sea at the moment are kind of expected to never have to pay PRT because they'll always be able to sort of avoid it. And so they're not paying royalties, they're not paying for the gas, and they're not paying any sort of tax on that gas. They'll pay company tax.
Getting it for free.
Getting it for free. It would be like if we were making a lot of bricks and a Japanese company came along and said, look, we need to build a lot of homes in Japan.
So that Russia doesn't
take it off. Otherwise Russia will have to get things from Russia. Give us your bricks. And we're like, okay. And
we just gave them away.
We just gave them away. We didn't even sort of say, well, would you like to pay for them? No, we're like, please take our bricks. Thank you for being so good and taking our bricks. It's such an absurd policy. But of course, not only are we not getting proper taxation revenue, all of that gas is contributing to climate change. And Australians are, because of our climate, because of our
landscape,
the fact that we are very much subject to extreme weather conditions, droughts and cyclones and flooding, we're really at the pointy end of the impacts of climate change. And who's helping us fund our ability to transform so that we'll reduce emissions or so that we can deal with the impacts of climate change? It ain't INPEX, it ain't these gas companies, they're just taking our gas, saying, thank you, we're going to make things worse for you, and we ain't helping you. And all the while, we got this wonderful debate about nuclear, and it's like, guys, this is happening right now.
Not in 2050, 2030. Yeah.
I mean, it was approved last Friday, and then the gas project was approved this week. These are real policy issues, and the government is saying, "Oh well, we had to follow the law. We just approved this gas project on the basis of the environmental laws that are in place." And it's like, you are in government. You can change those laws. You could put in a climate trigger.
Yep.
So that approval of gas and coal projects could be, you have to consider the impact on climate change. No, they're not doing. They're refusing to do that. Instead, they're saying, "Hey, we followed the law," and it's like, these were laws that John Howard and Tony Abbott liked.
Yeah,
John Howard and Tony Abbott, not well known for thinking climate change is real, and yet you're thinking, the way they did business was a good way to follow.
And so, if the government were willing to change this, what could they do to get some money out of it for the Australian people?
One thing that we at the Australian Institute have really been pushing for is, first, make them pay for the gas.
Yeah.
Make them pay for a royalty. Iron ore, coal, they pay royalties. Now, we certainly have issues with mining and how mining is taxed, but you can't deny the fact they actually have to pay for digging the stuff up, and the fact that once they dig it up, it's gone. The same with gas. Once they suck it out of the ocean floor, it's gone for good. One of the things that is quite bizarre is that Western Australia, this massive gas-producing state, the government raises more money from vehicle registrations than it does from gas royalties. Which is kind of, so
just people paying their reg.
And so you often hear, the government say, "Oh, if we tax them too much, they'll go." And it's like, well, okay, if they go, what's going to happen? You're still going to be getting more money from vehicle registrations than you do from, and believe me, it's not a heck of a lot of money that comes from vehicle registrations, but it's even less that comes from royalties, and also, I should say, gas royalties. And on PRRT, most of them don't pay it, haven't had to pay it. They might have to pay it for the years that cover the Ukraine invasion by Russia, because gas prices spiked so much that even their wonderful tax lawyers and accountants mightn't be able to hide the profits so much. But then, it's all just fiddling around. And so things they could do, make them pay the royalties. What we've also been arguing is reform the PRRT so it actually taxes those windfall profits, those super profits, because that's what it's meant to do. At the moment, it really is just a tokenist thing. The government put in some proposals to change the PRRT that have just passed, but they were so weak that when they were proposed, the gas companies and gas industry lobby groups came out immediately and said, yes, these are great reforms, please do them. Not a
great sign.
Yeah, when gas companies are asking for legislation that is going to notionally increase the amount of tax they pay to be passed, that sort of doesn't pass the smell test.
When they're that enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, kind of suggests that maybe they know that they're going to be able to game the system and they won't have to really pay higher tax at all. So it's those type of things we need to do. Tax the things you want less of. We want fewer, we want less emissions. Fossil fuels produce emissions. Let's tax them more. If people say, oh, they'll get up and leave, it's like, well, okay, that means the gas stays in the ground.
Yeah.
That's not a loss for us. That is a good thing. But believe me, these companies are not going to go elsewhere because the gas is here. They can't up sticks and take the gas to Malaysia or take it to India or something. No, the gas is here. What we're doing is approving, though, all these gas fields. We don't need new fields. We don't need new gas. We should just tax the gas fields that are there already properly. Work hard to get emissions down and stop faffing around talking about nuclear power so it's a real debate.
Yeah. So to sum up, Greg, the nuclear debate, just a huge distraction, really, from the fact that our emissions are not declining. They're just flatlining. And yet the government still keeps opening fossil fuel projects.
Yep, absolutely right, Leonora, and thank you everyone for listening. Today's episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 27th of June, and some things may have changed, but unfortunately, I don't think our emissions will have changed too much in any good way. You can read more about this topic and see all the graphs about emissions and how much gas we're producing in my column on the Guardian site, Grogonomics. for further research, especially our work looking at how much we are giving gas away essentially for free at australiainstitute.org.au. My Twitter handle and the handle I use at all social media is @GrogScammer. And Eleanor, have you got a Twitter handle?
I set it up. It's at EleanorJ_L. So that's ELINORJ_L.
Give her a shout out if you're on
Thanks.
Twitter. I'm actually taking a break for 2 weeks. So in the meantime, my spot will be filled by Matt Grudenoff, Senior Economist of the Australia Institute. Our theme music is by Blue Dot Sessions. So I won't see you next week, but Matt and Eleanor will see you all then. Bye.
Bye.